You might think that making a Nutella cheesecake is just as simple as taking a regular cheesecake and adding Nutella to it. I'm here to tell you that I tried that and it's not the case. You are not going to get the rich, silky smooth cream cheese texture that you should, and you're also not going to get that true Nutella flavor. So today I'm going to show you how to properly transform a classic cheesecake recipe into a rich chocolate hazelnutty Nutella cheesecake. Along the way, I'm going to be sharing some tips with you that are going to apply to any cheesecake you make ever, and they're going to help ensure that you always end up with a silky smooth, crack-free cheesecake. And guess what? There is no water bath required with any of my cheesecake recipes, especially not this one. So the first thing I want you to do is preheat your oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, let's talk about the crust. There's no pre-baking of the crust required. I tried a couple different varieties of crust, like graham cracker didn't quite do it, even though I love a good graham cracker with some Nutella spread on it. I thought it would work, wasn't as good. Oreo cookie crust really worked best, and so that's what we're doing today. Now, here's an important tip when you are making an Oreo crust, especially if you're doing it in a springform pan, which you should always be making cheesecake in a springform pan. You will need a 9-inch springform pan. I'll link to some of my favorite springform pans in the description. You will need 30 chocolate sandwich cookies or Oreo cookies for this recipe. Let me give you a tip. You are going to want to scrape out the filling from these into a separate dish. It might seem wasteful and it might seem like a pain to do it, but here's the thing. You might get lucky, throw in the cream, have no problem, and your crust is fine. I'm just going to drop these in my food processor because that's where they're going next. But what's most likely going to happen is the crust will leak all over your oven. All that filling will end up on the bottom of your oven. It'll be smoking. It will be a huge pain to clean up. And best case scenario, your cheesecake crust is soggy. We don't want either of those things to happen, so we're just going to take the extra couple minutes, even if it seems wasteful, and we're going to scrape out that filling. And no, I don't recommend mixing the Oreo filling into your cheesecake. Sometimes people ask if they can do that. I just don't recommend it. If a little bit gets left behind, that's probably not a huge deal. Probably. Hope you appreciate the confidence there. We are just going to pop this on here and blend until we have nice fine crumbs. Awesome. If you don't have a food processor, you could just break these up really well with a rolling pin. Put them in a plastic bag, beat them up with a rolling pin. All right, these are nicely pulverized, so we'll go ahead and just add our butter right into the food processor. Again, if you aren't using one of these, put it in a medium-sized mixing bowl, drizzle the butter over, and then just kind of stir it until all of the crumbs are moistened. But we're just going to not dirty another dish. Get all that butter in there. Did I say this is 5 tablespoons? This is 5 tablespoons of butter. I'm using unsalted, but really salted would work okay here too. Just pulse, like 5 half-second pulses. Sorry, it's backwards, so I get confused. There we go. Just remove the blade. And I'm just going to gently stir everything until I'm sure all those crumbs are moistened and that butter didn't just stick to the bottom. All right, remember we have a 9-inch springform pan. Drop those crumbs right in there. And now I'm going to tell you something that's going to help you with any cheesecake you make. You want to press this crust as far up the sides of the pan as you can. What you want to happen, this probably looks a little bit dark, is you want that crust to be higher than the cheesecake batter that you're adding. And this is important because once a cheesecake comes out of the oven, a lot of times it'll stick to the sides of the pan. And as it's cooling, it wants to shrink and constrict. If it starts to shrink, but it's stuck to the pan, you're going to end up with a crack right in the center. If your crust is higher than the cheesecake, then as it cools, that crust can shrink with the cheesecake. It gets rid of that tension, and then you don't have a cracked cheesecake. This is good. Slide it out of the way. You don't need to bake it. It's just going to hang out on the counter while you make your filling. And let's talk about our key ingredient, cream cheese. You need 24 ounces or 3 8-ounce bricks of cream cheese. You want full fat. Don't mess around with anything low fat, and don't use the tub style cream cheese. It has additives in it to make it creamy. You could end up with a texture that's not what we're looking for. So brick style full fat cream cheese. Another important thing, this needs to be nice and softened. See how easy it is for me to mush that? It's not a nice word to say, mush. We're making cheesecake. Softened cream cheese is important because the more firm it is, the more you're going to have to mix it to get it creamy. You're incorporating more air. That's going to mess with the texture. It's going to make your cheesecake rise and fall in the oven, or rise in the oven and then fall afterwards. You don't want to beat in more air than you need to. Also, it's going to minimize your chances of lumps because cold cream cheese is very prone to leaving lumps in your batter. And these are things to remember anytime you are making any cheesecake. Before we go any further, we are just going to beat this on low speed until it's smooth and creamy. This is another step just to help minimize the risk of lumps. Don't overdo it. Let's take a quick look. Nice, smooth, creamy, lump-free. Nikki, you want to come in and take a look at this just so the people can see what their cream cheese should look like? See? And you can make this in a stand mixer if you prefer. Use the paddle attachment, but today I'm just using my electric hand mixer. All right, next ingredient is Nutella. This is 1 cup of that chocolate hazelnut spread. I'm going to add it right in here, all of it, because it's expensive. We don't want to waste it. Now, Nutella is kind of tricky to work with in a cheesecake because you're trying to achieve that nice, really silky smooth texture, and Nutella just really wants to weigh it down and make it thick and heavy. We do a couple things to counteract that. We'll talk about that a bit more later on. We're also going to add some sugar. This is 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. I don't think I've been giving you guys the gram measurements. It's 150 grams of sugar. I always put them in the description. Try to remember to pop them up for you as well on the screen. But all of my recipes are tested using weights. That way I can make sure they are replicatable in your own kitchen and you're going to have the same results. All right, we're going to mix these together. Replicatable, so you can replicate it at home. So you can recreate it at home. That's what I'm going for. We need to scrape the sides and bottom. I usually smush it a bit too. This isn't mandatory, but kind of like to work out any air that's been worked in, because we don't want our cheesecake to puff up in the oven. All right, another quick stir before we move on. All right, next we have 1/3 cup of sour cream with all my spatulas. Add that in. Sour cream is so important to get a nice depth of flavor in cheesecake. Cream cheese alone is nice, but it doesn't quite do the same thing sour cream does. So almost all of my cheesecakes include at least some sour cream. You don't need a ton of vanilla extract. We're just going to add a teaspoon here. You can go right in with the sour cream, mix everything on low speed until that's nice and smooth and uniform. This next tip is critical, again, anytime you are making a cheesecake. This recipe is going to be using 4 large eggs. Ideally, these are at room temperature. In fact, I strongly recommend you use room temperature eggs because otherwise when they're cold, they're harder to incorporate. You need to mix in more air. The important thing with the eggs is we're going to add them 1 at a time. You never want to overbeat the eggs in your cheesecake once you add them into the batter. So we're actually going to give them a head start. Before we add them, we're just gonna lightly beat them. I like to say lightly scramble, but I made that mistake in my first cheesecake recipe. And then I got someone who thought she was supposed to scramble her eggs and then like scramble them on the stove top, like she was cooking eggs for breakfast, and then add them to the cheesecake. So I try not to say scramble anymore because I can only imagine how terrible that was. Sometimes I have nightmares about it. I'm not joking. So our eggs get added 1 at a time, and then we stir on low speed after each addition until the egg is just incorporated into the batter. Nick, you wanna come look at this? It's kind of gross actually when you get up close, but I want you guys to see the process. Egg number 2, just don't go crazy here. And cheesecake is a hard one for me to show restraint and stir on low speed too, I'll be honest, because I cannot get the cheesecake finished fast enough. I can't wait to eat it. Number 3, don't always count. 3, yes. Scrape your bowl periodically, very important. Last egg, number 4, if I counted correctly. Good thing I kept the shells, otherwise I would have lost track. Number 4, like I said, these tips apply to any cheesecake you're making, whether it uses Nutella or not. I think I have one cheesecake that breaks most of my rules, and that is my Basque cheesecake, which is that famous Spanish cheesecake. That breaks all the rules, but it's just a whole different animal. This ingredient is not one I use in most of my cheesecake recipes. This is heavy cream. You'll need a 1/2 cup of heavy cream for this recipe. Generally, I don't like to add it. I feel like it diminishes the tangy flavors of the cream cheese and it makes your cheesecake more prone to puffing up. There are a lot of reasons I generally don't add it. Here, it's essential. That Nutella really wants to weigh things down. The heavy cream is going to help bring some lightness back. It's going to ensure a nice lighter texture. I was so opposed to using heavy cream. I think I tried like 10, how many recipes? We tried a lot of recipes. Nikki will agree with me that didn't use cream. Finally, I gave in and we learned how to incorporate it properly. So here's how we do it. We had a 1/2 cup of cream. Just going to stir on low speed, and this is going to bring back that silkier texture that would otherwise be lacking because of the Nutella. And again, don't overmix. You know what you do with cream, you whip it, you whip air into it. It's really good at holding onto that air and getting nice and fluffy. We don't want our cheesecake like that. So I'm actually going to stop here. It's not totally incorporated, and I'm going to use my spatula to finish stirring everything and scraping the sides and bottom of the bowl. All right, let's bring back our springform pan, and we are just going to pour this batter into the pan. There should be no lumps because you did everything right. And hopefully your cheesecake doesn't go up higher than that crust line. If yours does, then here's a way to still protect your cheesecake from shrinking. When it comes out of the oven, as soon as it's done baking, take a sharp knife and run it between the cheesecake and the pan just to loosen it so that it can shrink without any tension. I don't want to leave any cheesecake batter behind. Let's just smooth this out into an even layer. All right, then something I recommend anytime you're baking a cheesecake is to bake it on a baking sheet. If you did everything right, you did the crust like we talked about, you should not have any problems with leaking. But springform pans are known to leak, especially if you don't have a great one. So just give yourself a little extra security. If any spilling happens, it'll get caught by the pan and you won't end up having to scrub your oven, which is terrible. This cheesecake is going in the center rack of our 325 Fahrenheit preheated oven. It's going to bake for about 60 to 70 minutes. It's finished baking. When the edges are set, you're still going to have some wobble in the center. That's normal and it's actually desirable, so your cheesecake has the proper silky texture. Now here's another tip that is going to ensure your cheesecake stays crack-free. We are going to cool it slowly. This is especially important in the winter months when your kitchen might be cold. As soon as your cheesecake is finished, turn off the oven, crack the door just like a couple of inches, and let the cheesecake cool in the oven for an hour before you remove it to room temperature to let it cool any more than it needs to before it's cool enough to go in your fridge. All right, the last thing we need to add is that thick ripple or thick layer of Nutella Ganache on top. Now, you can add this on top of any cheesecake you'd like a plain cheesecake would be great with this as well. It's very simple. You just need 3/4 cup of Nutella and a 1/3 cup of cream. You need to put them in a heat-proof dish. I'm just going to drop it into this measuring cup because it'll all fit. And the soonest you can add this to your cheesecake is when it's room temperature. So once it's cooled down out of the oven, you could add it then, or you can add it the next day before serving. But it does take a little bit of time for it to solidify and be sliceable instead of like messy and fudgy. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to just pop this in the microwave for like 25 seconds. We'll give it a stir. Let's see if this has melted enough. We're just going to want to whisk it until it's nice and smooth. And if yours won't become smooth, just give it a couple more seconds in the microwave. Looks funky at first. Once it's smooth and glossy, we're just going to pour it right evenly over our cheesecake. And like I said, if your cheesecake turns out yours did crack, we'll use that spatula. This is just a great way to hide any crack, and it would be a nice bonus to really just about any cheesecake. We're not going to waste any. You can push it to the edges if you want. And just like any ganache, this is going to need to set before you can cut into it, otherwise it'll be super messy. It usually takes like 20-30 minutes in the fridge, so I'm going to pop it in the fridge now, and we'll let this chill. All right, hopefully our cheesecake has solidified. When it comes to storing cheesecake, I always just keep it in the springform collar till it's time to serve, and then when I put it away, I just put the collar back on and store it. And you could always cover it with plastic wrap or whatever you'd like. All right, let's cut into this so you can actually get a look at this cheesecake and see these textures we've been talking about. That is how you do it. I hope you can see how silky smooth that texture is. I'm really proud of this. We made a lot of cheesecakes trying to get this just right. And I hope these tips help you whatever kind of cheesecake you are making. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I hope this was helpful, and I will see you next time. Time for the best part. It's a big bite. That is an excellent cheesecake. I'm going back for more. I have Oreo crumbs on my forehead. Okay, good. It's mostly ganache with a little bit of cream. I'd say the earliest, what?
You said it's mostly ganache with a little bit of cream.
Yeah. Ugh. I should stop there. You go there and you go there. Oh, I am super getting ahead of myself. Rewind, erase, pretend that didn't happen.